I never want it to come off as me being ungrateful for the opportunities I have. I can also be having the greatest time and simultaneously wishing people would stop sending me death threats.
Rachel Zegler may have been aiming to quiet her critics, but what she ended up posting did the exact opposite. It set everything ablaze. In a now viral clip, seemingly recorded from her own bedroom, the Snow White actress stared straight into the camera, her expression shifting between frustration and defiance. She made it clear that, no matter the overwhelming criticism thrown her way, people are still showing up, still lining up to support her work. Her voice wavered, caught somewhere between teary-eyed vulnerability and a sharp-edged, passive-aggressive pushback. She stood her ground, defending her performance while taking aim at the relentless negativity that has surrounded the project from the very start.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
She carried herself with the confidence of someone determined to take back control of her own story. But the internet had a different idea. Within minutes, clips from the video were everywhere, spreading like wildfire. TikTok creators wasted no time, stitching her words into reaction videos that swung between sheer disbelief and full-blown comedy skits.
Excuse me, your curtain. Please allow me to help.
Help? From you? Spare me your white savior complex.
I didn't mean to offend. I just thought you should know that
That I should know what? That some privileged white guy thinks his opinion matters? Get over your entitlement. I'm not some damsel in distress waiting for you to ride in on your high horse.
Meanwhile, over on X, formerly known as Twitter, things spiraled into absolute chaos. Rather than the redemption arc she seemed to be aiming for, Rachel had, without realizing it, given her critics exactly what they wanted, a goldmine of content to pick apart.
163,000 rating, of which it got 1.6, not out of 5. Like, you know, sometimes you go to McDonald's, it's 1.6 out of 5.
Yeah.
1.6 out of 10.
Vinny, you know what that is?
How bad is that?
The hashtag said it all. Hashtag cash grab, hashtag snowflop. What was meant to be a heartfelt defense came off as tone-deaf, self-indulgent, and completely disconnected from how the film was actually being received. But to some, this was hardly a shock. A lot of people online had been waiting for this moment.
All right, guys, I watched Snow White, so you don't have to. Let's get into it. Now, first things first, Snow White gets her name not from the fairness of her skin, as we obviously know. Rachel Zegler would be a miscast in that sense. Instead, she gets her name from surviving a snowstorm. Father and mother are king and queen to a utopian communist society. I'm not joking, guys. Everybody shares and is mindful of what each person is getting, and we spread our resources evenly, which is where this idea of fairness, as Snow White is the fairest of them all, is really presented in the film.
Some were even celebrating it. Screenshots of review bombs flooded timelines. Meme threads popped up mocking her past comments about not needing a prince. And like clockwork, out-of-context clips from old interviews resurfaced, adding more fuel to the fire.
I'm a narcissist. The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
Okay.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird. And then it became like, I will elbow everyone out of the way to play the part. That people will assume is a love story just because like we cast a guy in the movie, Andrew Burnap. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
I say, if I'm gonna stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
And we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
What was supposed to be a fairy tale comeback had morphed into a full-blown digital witch trial. And to those watching, the villain wasn't the evil queen. It was Rachel herself. People hadn't forgotten her earlier press interviews, where she casually dismissed the original 1937 Snow White as weird and creepy. And when she brushed off the film's romantic core as outdated, yeah, those clips had aged like milk. But this wasn't just online outrage. It showed up in the numbers. Snow White stumbled out of the gate with a shockingly low $45 million domestic opening, a dismal figure for a Disney live-action remake, especially one tied to the historic legacy of the studio's very first animated film. That number was downright jaw-dropping, especially when stacked against The Little Mermaid. Despite facing its own share of controversy and online debates, it still managed to rake in a solid $95 million during its opening weekend. Box office analysts weren't just worried, they were floored. Some even went as far as calling it one of Disney's biggest miscalculations in years. Others didn't sugarcoat it, they just called it a flop.
Snow White starring Rachel Zegler opened to a dismal $43 million, snagging the title of the lowest debut weekend for any Disney live-action remake, beating 2019's Dumbo at $46 million. They beat Dumbo. Shame on you, but it's for the worst ever.
Either way, the numbers spoke for themselves, and the fallout was swift. Major theater chains quietly started shifting Snow White off their biggest screens, replacing it with higher-performing films and pushing it into less desirable showtimes. Some theaters didn't even bother keeping it around, dropping it entirely by its second week. For a company like Disney, long known for dominating the theatrical market, this was nothing short of a disaster. This was unfamiliar ground, territory Disney had rarely, if ever, found itself in. And for Rachel, it was a public unraveling. Not even Disney's powerhouse marketing machine could course correct once audiences had already made up their minds and walked away. Then came the Oscars.
Please welcome Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot.
Visual effects push the boundaries of what we see on screen.
Their work makes the impossible seem possible.
With breathtaking ambition, they create magic that wraps its arms around our wildest imaginations.
Here are the nominees for Best Visual Effects.
What should have been a glamorous, celebratory moment turned into something else entirely. Rachel walked the red carpet with her co-star Gal Gadot. But the tension was impossible to ignore. Photos and videos captured a noticeable chill between them. Gal barely acknowledged Rachel during press appearances, standing stiff and avoiding eye contact. Observers online picked up on it instantly. Body language experts and gossip blogs wasted no time dissecting the awkward dynamic, pointing out what Disney's PR team had likely hoped to downplay. These two were not on good terms. Not anymore. Insiders later revealed that while Gal Gadot was contractually required to promote the film, she had since made the choice to quietly distance herself from both the project and its leading actress. What made it even worse, Gal's own reputation remained spotless. While Snow White crumbled, she kept landing roles, securing brand deals, and showing up at industry events without a hint of controversy. Rachel, on the other hand, found herself more isolated than ever. A small circle of die-hard supporters still stood by her, but their voices were drowned out by the overwhelming tide of criticism. Her Oscars appearance was supposed to be a chance at redemption, a carefully planned move to regain some control. Instead, it only solidified her as the face of Snow White's failure. The goodwill that once followed her from West Side Story, gone. The goodwill she once had from West Side Story had completely vanished. What she framed as an attempt to modernize a classic was seen by many as outright disrespect. The confidence she once carried, now, it read as arrogance. And her effort to take control of the narrative? It backfired in the worst way possible. What should have been her big breakout as a leading actress had instead become the very thing that shattered her public image, and maybe even changed the course of her entire career. Rachel Zegler's viral meltdown may have been the spark, but the fuel had been piling up for months. The moment Snow White's box office numbers started tanking, the internet went into overdrive. People wasted no time combing through her old interviews, dragging every controversial moment back into the spotlight. At the top of the list, her now infamous comments about the original Snow White. Clip after clip resurfaced, showing Rachel rolling her eyes and brushing off the original Snow White. She called the 1937 classic weird and outdated, scoffing at its romantic themes and making it clear that her version would be nothing like that. She proudly stated that this new Snow White wouldn't be saved by a prince, wouldn't dream about true love, and definitely wouldn't be just waiting around.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again.
But instead of being praised for a bold, feminist retelling, she was ridiculed for completely missing the point and for dismissing a film that generations have cherished. And this wasn't just coming from trolls or fringe voices. The backlash hit from real Disney fans. The ones who buy the merch, visit the parks, and show up on opening weekend. To them, it wasn't just a bad take. It felt like an insult. Parents made it clear. They weren't spending money on a movie where the lead actress had openly disrespected the original.
Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once, and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it.
Meanwhile, grandparents took to TikTok, sharing heartfelt stories about how the 1937 classic had touched them as children. They explained why they had no desire to see it reimagined by someone who seemed to have nothing but disdain for what made it special in the first place. Even those who had been neutral at first started jumping in, not just calling out Rachel's words, but her entire attitude during the press tour. Comment sections were flooded with words like smug, entitled, and out of touch. And unlike many stars who managed to handle public backlash with grace, or at least have industry allies step in to defend them, Rachel found herself standing alone. No co-stars came to her defense. No directors stepped up to vouch for her. Not a single heartfelt post from fellow actresses about how tough the industry can be. Just silence. An eerie, deafening void where even the smallest show of support might have made a difference. But none came. Instead, the silence said everything. Hollywood, it seemed, was already taking a step back. Behind the scenes, that quiet turned into real consequences. Reports began surfacing that Rachel's future projects were now under review. One studio insider told a trade outlet that while she had once been in discussions for several high-profile roles, those conversations had suddenly slowed way down. There were murmurs that entire marketing teams were rethinking whether she could still be the face of a campaign. Was she still bankable? Would audiences buy tickets to see her? Or was her name now tied too closely to controversy, bad press, and disappointing box office numbers? It's a brutal truth, but one Hollywood has always lived by. Perception is everything. Rachel Zegler, once hailed as the fresh new face of Gen Z stardom after her breakout in West Side Story, was now being seen as a cautionary tale. Her rise had been nothing short of meteoric. The glowing reviews, the Golden Globe win, the praise from Spielberg himself, it all painted the image of Hollywood's next big thing. But with Snow White, all that momentum disappeared. Her image, once shining with promise, had completely soured. And the worst part? This wasn't just a passing misstep, it was bad timing. In an era where audiences are more vocal than ever and unafraid to vote with their wallets, Rachel's controversy wasn't just a PR blunder. To some, she became a symbol, a representation of everything wrong with how beloved classics were being reimagined. She became a symbol of celebrity ego, unchecked and out of touch. And the real problem? People weren't just skipping the movie, they were rejecting her. Insiders say Rachel's team is in full damage control mode. Publicists, agents, and managers are reportedly scrambling, trying to reshape the narrative, pitching her for redemption-style interviews and softer press appearances. But at this point, the damage might already be done. Walking back viral clips is nearly impossible, and winning back an audience that feels burned, even harder. Hollywood has seen stars recover from worse, but only when they've shown the humility to apologize or the charm to win people over again. So far, Rachel has done neither. Instead, she's doubled down, pushed back, and stayed defiant. And with every misstep, the road to redemption gets even narrower. Some are already saying it. Hollywood's It Girl, once set to lead Disney's next big franchise, may have just become one of the most stunning downfalls in recent memory, not just because of one bad film, but because of the choices she made when the spotlight was shining the brightest.